The hardest thing was what there were a number of things that were hard. Okay, first was coming up with the basic idea. Okay, second was seeing how it might fit with other ideas. But the starting point was really realizing that people needed a different kind of manual, okay? I mean, I read all the manuals that were out there. Some of them are really terrific. I learned a huge amount from the Reporter's Handbook, the IRE manual from the United States, especially the first version, which is incredible. But, you know, these are very complex books for a beginner. If you don't already know how to report very well, you're not going to be able to benefit from those books. By the time I began to write story-based inquiry, I'd been teaching undergraduates and then graduate students for many years. I think it was almost 20 years. Was it that long? 15 years. And I realized something, which was that I never had a student who could not find some kind of information. But I had a lot of students who could not write good stories. You know, and it seemed to me that the big disconnect was between the information and the stories. You know, I had to figure out a way to make that connection easier. What's the problem with starting with your idea of what the story is? And then I thought that it was so much easier to verify something than to discover something. When I began teaching them to my students, you know, I saw that they were actually able to do the job better. And then what happened was the people from Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalists came to me and said, well, we want to do a manual and, you know, we'd really like you to do it. They decided that after they saw me speak at a global investigative journalism network meeting in Amsterdam. The first idea was to do it for students. We had all these young people coming to our, you know, global network conferences, and a lot of them just looked lost. And I thought, well, you know, we can make this easier for them, and they're the people we have to think about. Because, you know, at the time, you went to the conferences, and everybody was in their 40s or 50s. I thought, if we don't get some young people in here, we're going to disappear someday. You know, that was a very unsettling thought. So, anyway, so my first idea was to do it for these young people. And I discovered that experienced investigators liked it too. So, you know, of course, that made me very, very happy. I don't believe it anymore. This is the Renaissance time, man. It's unbelievable. I can't believe what I am seeing. I mean, you know, I go to 4 continents every year. Everywhere, not only are people doing this stuff, but they're doing better than they ever did. You know, let's go back to this question. Is investigative journalism too slow and too expensive, you know? One of the problems is that people set their sights too high when they're starting. You know, they don't think about whether or not the story is doable. One of the things you need to do when you look at a story, when you make a hypothesis, is say, where will I get this information? If you can't see where at least some of it is going to come from, then you better not start. You know, otherwise you're just wandering the landscape like a lost cow. That doesn't do anyone any good. The second thing is, people think it's slow and expensive. Well, one of the reasons it's slow and expensive is when you do it in a disorderly way, which is the way I did it when I was starting out. We all did it that way. We just go out and get masses of information and then try and fit it together into a story. Well, you know, that's not how people build houses. They don't gather a pile of cement and stones and wood and say, now it's going to be a house. They design the house and they say, what kind of stones and wood do we need to build this? You get that too, and gee, you know, it actually works. It's much more effective. And final thing, when you're getting started in investigation, all you have to think about is getting something that no one gave you. That's what investigation is about. It's getting something for yourself. Even just one little piece of the story, getting it will change you. You know, you'll stop being one of these people who's dependent on their sources to tell them things. What I've found to be true is that there is never as much open information as you want, but there's always more than you knew was there before you started looking. I just saw an amazing example of this. I mean, I practically fell out of my chair. You would think that Russia is a terrible place to do investigative reporting. So Stephen Gray and his team did this incredible investigation of corruption in Russia, touching Putin's inner circle. And the key part of the investigation was based on public records. You wouldn't think that Russia is a great place to get open information. So they were able to find out so much about these government projects that ended up being sponges for corrupt money. It was incredible, and I never would have thought that that could happen. You know, one of my first students in Arabia was a Syrian guy. He wanted to get a report by the Secret Services. He thought, well, I'm never going to get this. We said, sometimes people put documents in libraries. You know, he found it in the National Library. You never know what's there till you start looking for it. The second issue is the courts. Okay, what happens in libel trials? And there, it's very country specific, but investigative reporters need to study what's happening in the courts with the same intensity that they study corruption. And, you know, of course, sometimes it's the same thing. Well, sure, there's a lot of people doing silly things, you know. But, you know, you don't have to be serious all the time. I have never seen a media format that was 100% investigation that was a success. Okay, people like to see other things too. Beyond that, people need to have more revenue streams. That's absolutely certain. And, you know, I'm doing research on this now. There are other revenue streams. There are different ways that people can raise money to do their work. But, you know, it's a mistake to think that investigation is always subsidized. If you can build a public that sees you as defending their interests through your investigative work and making their lives better, they will support you. You know, there are different ways to monetize that support. You can have sponsors, you can have subscriptions, you can have donations, you know, you can sell products, you can stage events. You know, there are many, many ways that people are actually making revenue. None of them is decisive. So the days when circulation and advertising would pay for everything you wanted to do are over. But, you know, there are new ways of monetizing the work and supporting the work that are coming online. And, you know, I mean, this is what I'm working on right now, so I can only say a few things about it. Okay, but I think sponsorship, events, people managing events, people working with artists is another thing that's happening. There are a lot of things that are happening now that will enable people to live from this work. The single most important thing is that they have to understand that what investigative journalism is about is changing the society. And you have to find the communities that want change. There are a number of things that you have to do, but the thing is this, okay? You are not going to be able to live off advertising anymore, whether or not the companies are government owned. That's happening everywhere. Okay, advertising is a shrinking part of media budgets. You know, so you have to develop new revenue streams. Now, there are also some other things you need to do to reduce costs. You can think of exchanges of labor with institutions who give you access to certain resources, such as libraries or databases. You can think of exchanges with people, for example, who sell food, so that, you know, you have something to eat and it reduces the cash income needs. You can make deals with lawyers who will cover you from libel. Okay? So on the one hand, you reduce your costs, and on the other hand, you diversify the revenue streams. That's not a magic formula. Somebody has to work at it. And by the way, the single universal trait I've noticed among investigative reporters, well, it's not universal, but most of them don't think about revenue streams, okay? What they're thinking about is getting the story. That's great. You need to be a little obsessed. But, you know, to me, the number one in the world is Seymour Hersh. Seymour Hersh started life as a publisher. He wasn't a reporter. He published a newspaper, okay? When you talk to that guy, okay, he thinks about money and getting the story out and getting money for it because that was his school. He had to do that or business. Nobody cared what he was writing. I just think that's inspiring. You know, why wouldn't we think about the business? It's not dirty. I think what Inga Spring is doing in Latvia with Baltica is amazing. You know, just a great example of, you know, how somebody can just say, I'm going to do this and do it. The Bureau of Investigative Journalism in London has been absolutely incredible on the drone story. Stephen Gray at Reuters, incredible. Andrew Jennings, the guy who blew up FIFA, man, that is one of the heroic stories in the history of the business. And there's Malaysia Kini in Kuala Lumpur, great publication. There's organized crime for trailblazers. It's just amazing, man. Every time you go someplace, you see people who are doing stuff that was unimaginable 20 years ago. And of course, there's the ICIJ, the International Coalition of Investigative Journalists, you know, who are pioneering new organizational structures as well. You know, they're developing distributed teams. And I'll say one more thing as well, okay? I've worked with Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism since 2006. I'm amazed what they've been able to do in the Arab world. I mean, just amazed. people say that there's a lot of tough places to work, and it's true. But, you know, the impact those reporters have had and their courage in incredible circumstances, just terrific, you know. And, you know, one more thing about it, all of their reporters are young, and boy, are they having fun. You know, we always talk about, oh, this job is dangerous. Oh, it'll hurt your career. Well, you know, nobody talks about the fact that you get to hang out with some really incredible people and have a lot of fun doing something that you actually care about. You know, that's kind of priceless. And it's worth being scared every now and then.